Welcome to Lattes and Laundry, a podcast created to keep you company as you fold the clothes or for when you take your well-deserved coffee break. Life at home, while never dull, can sometimes be a little lonesome. My hope is that this podcast makes you feel like you have a friend with you as you go about your day. I'm so glad that you're here. Hello, friends. Welcome to my brand new podcast. I am so excited to be doing this podcast. I have had starting a podcast on my list of things to do for the last several years. So I am so excited to finally be starting a podcast. I'm so excited that it finally dawned on me that I could do it in this YouTube format, because it always seemed rather daunting to me. I felt like I would have to buy a lot of equipment. I felt like I would have to figure out how to get on Spotify and Apple Music and all of that kind of thing. And if this does well, I may eventually at some point move to those platforms. But for now, I just am so glad I've realized that I could do this on YouTube. So before I go any farther into the episode, I wanted to kind of introduce myself a little bit, because I'm not going to assume that everybody that is listening to this knows me from my other platforms. So my name is Emily. I, for the last probably 6 years or so, have been running an Instagram account and a YouTube channel under the name Sweet Magnolias. So I had the name Sweet Magnolias prior to Netflix starting their show. So I've been running that account for, I think it's been around 6 years. It was probably about a year after I got married. So I share a lot of homemaking stuff over there, style content, thrifting content, stuff about motherhood, just a lot of homemaking related topics or things that I am interested in. And a lot of things that I share on my YouTube channel are things that I am also going to share on my podcast. But the difference is going to be that with my YouTube channel, I like for things to be very visually artistic and beautiful. And there are a lot of topics that I think of and things that I want to talk about, but I don't always have the time to put into making a beautiful video about it. I'm trying my best this year to get out one video on my YouTube channel a week. I struggle a little bit, but that's what I'm trying to do. But I don't always have the time to dedicate to a whole video for a topic that I want to talk about. And so I think with podcast, I can it's just a voice recording. So I can kind of hop on, talk about it, put it in a podcast episode, and it can be another way of sharing, but it's a little bit easier on me. So this podcast is going to be a lot of me sharing my thoughts on things, or talking about topics that I'm interested in, or just little things that I'm interested in. I've always loved podcasts, and I feel like the reason that I love them so much is because I am a stay-at-home mom. I have 2 kids. They're 15 months apart. My oldest just turned 4, and my youngest will be turning 3 next month. So I spend a lot of time at home, and it's usually just me and the 2 toddlers. And my husband, he works in construction, so depending on the season, he can be working a lot of overtime and just really busy at work. And so a lot of times it's just me and the kiddos all day long for really long periods of time. And up until recently, we weren't even really leaving the house a whole lot. We were just staying home a lot. So it can get kind of lonely, and you can kind of start to feel isolated a little bit. And I feel like having a podcast playing and having somebody talk to me is something that kind of helps me in a way, because it feels like I have somebody there with me, or it takes my mind kind of out of my little bubble. Particularly the storytelling ones do that for me. But that's kind of how I want this podcast to feel. I want this podcast to feel like we're friends, and I'm having a conversation with you as you either fold your laundry, or you do your dishes, or maybe when you sit down and have your coffee break. I want it to feel like you have a friend there with you for the lonely days, for the days where you feel isolated, or for the days where, maybe you're having a good day and you just want to listen to a topic. But I want it to feel like we're friends and there's just a conversation being had. Since this is the first episode, I thought it would be fun to kind of give you the backstory on how I came to be a homemaker, because there was a big shift in my life that came to me being a homemaker. So I thought it would be fun to tell you that story. So my very first job was at Kmart. I was part-time. This was when I was in high school. I was homeschooled, so I actually graduated a year early. I graduated in 2013 when I was 17. I believe that I got my Kmart job in 2012 and then graduated in 2013. Me and my husband knew out of high school that our goal was going to be working towards getting married. We had to get some ducks in a row in order for us to get married, in order for my dad to approve us to get married. So we knew that that was kind of our path once we got out of high school. And I kind of had a photography thing going on the side, but it never really turned into anything. But I was trying to make photography work and working part-time. But I just kind of decided, because college didn't work out for me, photography wasn't working out for me, I was still living at home, I kind of decided I needed to get a full-time job. So I got a full-time job as a bank teller at a credit union. Never had I worked in banking before, so I had to learn everything new. But I got the job as the bank teller, and I really liked my job. When I first got it, I really liked it. And I'm trying to piece together the timeline. And so if I say a date wrong, or, it obviously doesn't make sense, just forgive me. But I got the full-time job, I believe it was at the tail end of 2015. I think it was at the tail end of 2015 that I got that job. And we got engaged that same December. And I think I had been working my job since maybe August or the middle of the summer, something like that. We got engaged at the end of 2015. And then in 2016, we got married. So my husband was working night shift full-time at a grocery store distribution center, so like the warehouse part, and I was working full-time first shift. So we were kind of missing each other. When we first got married, we would see each other for little bits and pieces on the weekdays, and then of course we'd see each other on the weekend. And on the weekend, I'm trying to catch up with all my cleaning and homemaking and all of that kind of thing. And I think I should note that I always knew that I would be at home at some point, because I always knew that when I had children, I wanted to stay home full time. Now, Brennan had actually mentioned that I could stay home at the beginning of our marriage. Like, he mentioned that I didn't have to work if I didn't want to. And if I could go back, I think I would have taken him up on that. But at the time, I really liked my job, and I felt like we needed the money, and I didn't have any children yet, so I opted to keep working. But it was kind of difficult because we were on different shifts. So while we were, he was on third and I was on first, and we continued that pattern. And I remember feeling really kind of stressed out because I didn't like being by myself at night, and I would end up staying up really late to do my homemaking at night because I just didn't want to go to sleep. Just little things, no newlyweds want to be alone, it's not fun. So there was little things that I remember thinking, gosh, I wish I could just be home. But at that point, we had kind of strapped ourselves into a couple of bad financial decisions. So I definitely felt the responsibility to keep adding to our income in order to help with some of the financial burden that we had gotten ourselves into. But in 2018, some circumstances changed at my job, and things started to kind of go downhill for me. And it was not good for my stress level. I will say that for sure. It was definitely not good for my stress level. I was coming home very upset every day. There was just a lot of things that the job was not working for me anymore. And by the end of 2018, we had celebrated 2 years of marriage. So we decided that 2019 was the year that we were going to try to start our family. We were going to try to have a baby. So that kicked off 2019, and in March, I found out I was pregnant. Now, kind of since the middle of 2018, I had started looking into what I was going to do. Was I going to just completely quit my job, which I really wanted to do, but like I said, we had some financial burdens at the time. I started looking into other jobs. I actually applied for several other jobs. I actually applied to a job and got an interview and couldn't go to the interview because they wanted me to come in the very next day, and I couldn't work it out with my job. I was afraid to tell them that I had an interview somewhere else. And so I had interviewed different places. I had looked into getting a job where my husband worked. I had looked into all these different things. I think I even joined an MLM at the time because I was just so desperate to get out of the situation that I was in. So by the beginning of 2019, I had already pretty much decided I'm quitting this job and I'm coming home. And originally we said, okay, you can quit your job, you can come home, stay home for a couple of months and find another job. But then I found out I was pregnant. And so what ended up happening was in March, I found out I was pregnant. I had already decided that I'm leaving this job. I told them by the end of May, I was gone and I was just going to come home. And at that same time, my husband was in the process of getting another job. He had done the interviews and it was a long process, but he was in the process of changing careers completely. And we had one of the bad financial decisions we made was to buy a car on car payments. And if you've watched my YouTube channel, you know that we will never, ever do that again. But we had already put the car up for sale. So we were actively trying to sell it. That and some medical bills, I think, was our only debt outside of our mortgage at the time. So it wasn't solved, but we were on the path to solving it by listing the car for sale. And by the end of May, that was it. I left my job and came home. And then I was home for a month with Brennan still on night shift. And then he started his new job in July. So he started a completely new career in July. But I was home. And thankfully, I was blessed enough to be able to stay home for the rest of my pregnancy, which was a huge blessing, especially considering the fact that the job that I was at was very stressful for me, and I was coming home. I'm not the kind of person who has a very good work-life balance. I was never good at that, and I'm also not good at leaving work at work. I was never good at that, and so I was coming home from work, and it would take me an hour of crying and telling my husband about my day for me to let it go. It's very hard for me to not bring it home. And so that the kind of stress that I was feeling was not good for me. And so I can't imagine continuing that throughout my pregnancy. I cannot imagine that. So I am very thankful and I feel very blessed that I was able to be home for that pregnancy. I was able to do all the nesting that I wanted to do and get our house in order for our baby. And we did end up selling the car before the baby came. But we did go through a lot of financial ups and downs for the first couple of years. And, we had our children very close together. So we did go through a lot of financial ups and downs in those first couple of years that I came home. But the Lord provided. He was so good to us and He took care of us. He took care of us in ways that I'm still astounded by. By the time we were pregnant with our daughter, we were in a situation where his job, his new career, what happened was he was working for a contractor company as an inspector, and we are from North Carolina. So the year that he started, North Carolina had overspent their budget, and it caused all the contracted inspectors to get laid off from state jobs, or a lot of them got laid off from state jobs. So there wasn't a state job for him to get on, which meant that they were just kind of scrambling to find him work. So it made income kind of slow. And so when we found out, we got pregnant with our daughter, and it was just a whole bunch of stuff. But towards the end of 2020, and everybody knows 2020 was a dumpster fire. By the end of 2020, he was not getting any hours. He ended up having to pick up a part-time job, and he couldn't quit his existing job because of insurance. So we were kind of in a bind, and the Lord just worked it out so perfectly. Right around the time she was born, there was a state job, all lined up for him through some connections that we had at church, and the Lord just really worked it out in a way better than we ever could have imagined. He got to stay with the same company, so we got to keep our same insurance, but yet he was able to get on a job with steady hours, with better pay, a state job, which is what he wanted to be doing. It was just amazing, and I just can't tell you how much the Lord has provided for us. All our marriage, even from the beginning, He has provided for us. But ever since I came home, yes, there have been some hard times. Yes, there have been times that weren't fun, especially financially, with not having money. But we may not have had everything that we wanted, but we had everything we needed, and it really taught me a lot. Me and my husband talk about it all the time, how we feel like even though those hard times are not fun, they really teach you a lot, and they teach you to be grateful for what you do have, and they teach you to be grateful when you find yourself in a better place, which, thank the Lord, we are in a much better place financially now. His job is a lot better now. We are in a position now that we've not been in our whole marriage. All be glory to God. Glory goes to Him for that. But even though now that we're in a better spot, we can look back at those times and we're still so grateful for where we are now, because, we remember those times where, your chest gets tight when you go to the grocery store because you don't have a very big grocery budget, or, there's just stress. There's so much stress associated with financial things. But even though the times were hard, the Lord took care of our every need. We never went without food. We never went without the money to pay our mortgage bill. We never went without what we needed. We didn't have to go without, clothes on our backs. We had clothes on our backs. We had food to eat. We had love in our home. We had a home. There was just so many blessings all throughout the hard times. It has always been the desire of both mine and my husband's heart for me to be able to stay home with our children. And I believe that the Lord has placed that desire in our heart. I don't think that every single mother is called to stay home full time, but I do believe that the Lord put that desire in my heart, and I do believe that He's called me to it. And I think that He has blessed us. And even through hard times and through struggles, there's been so many lessons learned, and there's been so much of His provision that we've been able to see. And I think a lot of times God wants to show you His provision in those times where it just doesn't seem like it's going to work out. He makes it work out so that okay, that was from the Lord. I look back over our life together and just all of the moments that I saw the Lord show up in. Even before we got married, we almost didn't get our house. The Lord really worked that out in a wondrous way, worked some miracles, because we almost did not get our house. So there's just been so many handfuls of purpose that I've seen the Lord give us over the years. And ever since I came home, times may have been hard, but the Lord always took care of us. And I just find great comfort in that, in knowing that we are where the Lord wants us to be, and that He's watching over us and taking care of us. So that was a little bit about me and about my life and how I came to be here in this place talking to you. I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope that you got some encouragement from it. I hope that maybe it made your day just a little bit better. And I hope that you will stick around for future episodes of this podcast. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to lay this podcast out in seasons, because I see other people that do podcasts and they do them in seasons, and I think that's really cool. So I'm going to try to do this in seasons. So this would be episode 1, season 1. But I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to lay out a theme for season 1 or what. I'm really not sure. I'm sure I'll get more refined at this thing as I do more of them. And eventually I would like to bring on some guests. I've just got to figure out how exactly I can do that with the format that I'm using. So I don't know. We shall see. We will figure it out. But I hope that you will subscribe to this channel. I will also leave all of my handles and links and all that for all of my other platforms down below. I'll also leave my email if you want to email me. For now, it's probably going to be Actually, you know what? I think I made a Gmail for this podcast. If I didn't, it will be my Sweet Magnolia's email, but I'll leave an email down in the description box if you need to contact me. Also, leave me a comment and let me know if you enjoyed this episode. Please join me next time. I hope that you will come back for another episode of Lattes and Laundry. Y'all have a great week.